One of my favorite topics to discuss when it comes to horror movies is the deep cuts, the hidden gems that don't get recognition. Whether that's because they're low budget, or because they weren't marketed well, or maybe they just flew under the radar. Regardless, there are a ton of horror movies out there that deserve to have a light shone upon them, and I like to help with that as much as I can. And that is exactly what I want to do today. So join me as we look at 5 unique horror movies that will haunt you on this episode of Ranking Rumble. Welcome back to WWH. My name is Andrew Dreamer. Like I said, we've done these hidden gems videos a few times before, and they're always a lot of fun. For this one though, I wanted to look at it a little differently. I tried to find some unique horror movies for this one. Unique can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and that's fine. But for me, all of these movies on this list, I find them unique personally. As always though, it's subjective and it's just my opinion. I'd love to hear about some more of your unique and obscure horror movies that you love, so leave me a comment with some recommendations. Before we dive into this goldmine though, be sure to body slam that subscribe button and drop kick that like button as hard as you can so you never miss any of the hard-hitting, chill-inducing 5-star matches we have here at WWH. On that note, it is bell time, so grab your popcorn and make your way to your seat. Let's head down to the ring. Starting us off at number 5 is Brain Damage, released in 1988. Directed by Frank Henenlotter, this is one of those cult horror films that feels completely unhinged in the best possible way. The story follows a young man named Brian who suddenly finds his life spiraling out of control after he becomes host to a mysterious parasitic creature. This creature attaches itself to him and begins influencing his behavior in increasingly disturbing ways, offering him euphoric experiences in exchange for a very dark and dangerous dependency. As Brian struggles to maintain a sense of normalcy, he quickly realizes that he may be losing control over both his body and his mind. What makes Brain Damage stand out right away is its bizarre concept. The creature, small, grotesque, and disturbingly charismatic, doesn't just harm its host. It forms a twisted, symbiotic relationship with him. There's almost a darkly comedic dynamic between Brian and the parasite, which gives the film a strange personality that's equal parts horror and pitch black humor. The tone constantly walks a tightrope between absurdity and genuine unease, which keeps you off balance throughout the film. Another element that makes the film unique is how it blends body horror with social commentary. Beneath all the gore and outrageous moments, there's a clear metaphor about addiction and loss of control. The way Brian becomes dependent on the creature mirrors substance abuse in a way that feels both exaggerated and uncomfortably real. It's not subtle, but it's part of the charm. The film leans all the way into its themes without holding back. Visually and stylistically, Brain Damage embraces a gritty, low-budget aesthetic that actually enhances its impact. The practical effects are grotesque and memorable, giving the film a tactile, almost grimy feel that fits perfectly with its underground tone, and that's why I think it fits into this unique category. Coming in at number 4 is Magic, released in 1978. This psychological horror film was directed by Richard Attenborough and stars Anthony Hopkins in one of his most unsettling early performances. The story follows Corky, a struggling magician who reinvents himself as a ventriloquist with the help of a facetious fuck named Fats. I love alliteration. By the way, Fats is his ventriloquist dummy. What begins as a promising rise to fame quickly takes a darker turn as Corky becomes increasingly dependent on the dummy, not just as part of his act, but as an outlet for thoughts and impulses he can't seem to control. As his personal and professional life begin to intertwine, that line between performer and performance starts to blur in deeply disturbing ways. What makes Magic so effective is how grounded it feels despite its eerie premise. There are no flashy supernatural elements driving the horror, at least not in the conventional sense. Instead, the film leans heavily into psychological tension, leaving you constantly questioning where the true danger actually lies. Is the threat external, or is it something much more internal? That ambiguity creates a slow building sense of dread that sticks with you long after the film ends. Another unique aspect of the film is its reliance on performance rather than spectacle. Anthony Hopkins delivers a deeply committed portrayal that makes Corky both sympathetic and unsettling. His interactions with Fats are especially memorable, giving life to the dummy in a way that feels disturbingly real without needing any elaborate effects. The voice, timing, and body language all work together to create the illusion that Fats has a personality of his own, one that's far more aggressive and unpredictable than Corky's. Visually, the film is restrained, focusing on the atmosphere rather than shock value. This restraint is part of what makes it unique among other horror films of its era, which, of course, is exactly what I was looking for. Instead of relying on gore or jump scares, Magic builds tension through quiet moments, uncomfortable conversations, and the growing sense that something is deeply wrong beneath the surface. It's a character-driven horror film that explores identity, control, and the fear of losing oneself, making it a uniquely intimate and unsettling performance. One that's definitely worth a watch. Next up at number 3, we have Absentia, released in 2011. Absentia is a slow-burning atmospheric horror film directed by Mike Flanagan long before he became the Mike Flanagan that we all know and love now. But his talent was still definitely on full display back even in 2011. The story centers on a woman named Trisha whose husband has been missing for 7 years and is now presumed dead. As she prepares to move on with her life, her sister Callie comes to stay with her, offering support during the difficult transition. However, as strange occurrences begin to unfold around the home, particularly near a dark, ominous tunnel nearby, the women start to suspect that something far more unsettling may be tied to the husband's disappearance. What makes Absentia unique is how restrained it is. The film builds tension through suggestion, atmosphere, and a creeping sense of unease. Much of the horror exists in what you don't see, allowing your imagination to fill in the gaps in ways that you can feel far more disturbing than what can be shown outright. This minimalist style proves that effective horror doesn't need a big budget, just strong ideas and careful execution. Another unique element is how the film blends emotional realism with the supernatural dread. At its core, Absentia is about grief, loss, and the difficulty of accepting the unknown. The characters feel grounded and believable, which makes the increasingly strange events around them hit that much harder. The film takes its time exploring the emotional weight of Trisha's situation, making the horror feel personal rather than purely external. The setting also plays a major role in the film's identity. The tunnel itself becomes a central symbol, dark, mysterious, and deeply unsettling. It represents both the literal and metaphorical unknown, and the way it's used throughout the film creates a constant sense of dread. Absentia delivers a hauntingly unique experience that lingers in your mind long after it's over. Coming in at number 2 is Alone in the Dark, released in 1982. Alone in the Dark is a lesser-known slasher with a surprisingly unique setup. Directed by Jack Shoulder, the story follows a new psychiatrist who takes the job at a mental institution housing several extremely dangerous patients. After a citywide blackout throws everything into chaos, a group of these patients escape and make their way to the psychiatrist's home, where his family is left vulnerable. What follows is a tense, unpredictable night as danger closes in and the boundaries between sanity and madness begin to blur. What immediately sets Alone in the Dark apart from other slashers of its era is its perspective. Instead of focusing solely on a masked killer or a faceless threat, the film gives significant attention to the escaped patients themselves. Each one has a distinct personality and backstory, which makes them feel like fully formed characters rather than typical horror villains. This adds an extra layer of unease because their actions feel erratic and harder to predict compared to a standard slasher antagonist. The film also stands out for its cast, featuring performances from Jack Palance, Martin Landau, and the legendary Donald Pleasence. That's right, this film has Dr. Sam Loomis in it, which makes it a winner in my book. These actors' presence elevates the material. It brings a level of intensity that elevates it and brings that credibility that you don't often see in a lower budget horror film, and especially from the 1980s. Another unique aspect is how the film plays with the idea of who the real monsters are. By placing a psychiatrist at the center of the story and surrounding him with these everyday people, the movie subtly questions the line between normal and abnormal behavior. It doesn't have to rely on gore or elaborate kills. Instead, it can build tension through character dynamics, unpredictability, and that looming threat of violence. The blackout setting enhances this even further, creating a sense of isolation and vulnerability that runs throughout the film. Overall, Alone in the Dark is a hidden gem that blends slasher elements with psychological horror in a way that feels ahead of its time. Its focus on character-driven tension, combined with its eerie premise and strong performances, makes it stand out from many of its contemporaries, especially considering it came out during that boom period of slasher films. Our number one entrant today is After Midnight, released in 2019. After Midnight is an unconventional blend of horror, romance, and character drama directed by Jeremy Gardner and Christian Stella. Gardner also stars in the film alongside Brea Grant. The film follows Hank, a man living a quiet, somewhat isolated life whose world is suddenly shaken when his longtime girlfriend unexpectedly leaves him. As he struggles to process the separation, something begins appearing outside his home each night, an unseen presence that claws at his door and threatens to get in. Left alone with his thoughts and this nightly disturbance, Hank is forced to confront both an external threat and his own internal turmoil. What makes After Midnight stand out is how it subverts expectations of what a horror movie is supposed to be. Rather than focusing on constant scares or action, the film spends much of its time exploring Hank's emotional state and the complexities of his relationship. The horror elements are there, but they take a back seat to a deeply personal story about love, loss, and the fear of commitment. This creates a unique tone where quiet, introspective moments carry just as much weight as the suspenseful ones. Another distinctive feature is the film's structure and pacing. It unfolds in a non-linear way, blending present-day events with flashbacks that gradually reveal the dynamics of Hank's relationship. This approach allows the audience to piece together the emotional context behind his situation, making the story feel more layered and meaningful. The dialogue often feels natural and unpolished, which adds to the film's grounded, almost indie-like authenticity. Much like the emotional struggles Hank is dealing with, the threat outside his door is ambiguous and difficult to define. This ambiguity invites interpretation, making the film feel more like a metaphor than a straightforward monster story. Combined with its mix of humor, melancholy, and tension, After Midnight becomes something far more unusual than your typical horror film. An intimate character study wrapped in the shell of a creature feature. I love this movie. It's unique, it's engaging, and it's very well made. If you haven't seen this movie, I really think you should seek it out and watch it today. I honestly cannot recommend it enough. But there you have it. Those are 5 unique horror movies that will haunt you. 5 hidden gems among a sea filled with average. Thank you for joining me today. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about my list and leave me some recommendations. Maybe we'll get enough to do yet another Hidden Gems video soon, which would be perfectly fine with me. Now that we've talked about some unique hidden gems, what are some found footage hidden gems? Luckily, you can find out by watching the video that's appearing on your screen now. And remember, in the squared circle of horror, there are no countouts for nightmares. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.